So I would be crazy to not bring up the elephant in the room today and this entire week, and that is US President Donald Trump. We're here to talk about Russia, so I'll use that framework to think about Trump's influence. But, you know, he has in the past said he could resolve the war in one day. He has in the past, and more recently as well, said that NATO needs to up its defense spending to even 5%, which would cause all the same problems that you're describing in Russia in Europe. How do you respond to that?
First of all, I mean, I wasn't so surprised of anything in the speech, but I was a bit sad that Ukraine, he didn't mention Ukraine, and that is troubling, I think, of course. We'll see what happens, because yesterday, me and Valdis was the same meeting as a good friend of mine, Sergei Marchenko, who is Minister of Finance in Ukraine. He came to ECOFIN, and I visited him. When I see his work, when I see all the soldiers, I mean, they are doing so much to, not only to see that Ukraine will be free, but that Europe will be free. It's so much more to do, and I hope that the new administration also wants that. But if it's so, that they won't do as much as we hope, we have to do more. Now, when it comes to defense spending, on one hand, it's reasonable that Europe do more, because US has done very much, so that's reasonable. So I think we have to do more. But I don't think, maybe, even Trump wants 5% from them, because he, I mean, US
That's what he said.
Yeah, but US is also...
it was hard enough for NATO countries to up to 2%, so 5% is a huge jump.
Yeah, definitely, so it won't be 5%, but because I don't think Trump wants, for the US economy, have 5%, because they have quite a large debt.
Yeah, that's true. That's very well put. Commissioner, similarly, you know, I know you work closely with your American counterparts on sanctions. What is your sense of how a change in administration in the United States will change overall strategy towards Russia?
First of all, we must understand that this is a war which is taking place in European continent. So, as European Union, we cannot shy away from this. So, it's clear that it's first and foremost for Europe to react. And given the fact that Russia is openly talking about invading other countries if they are successful in Ukraine, it's on one hand important to provide all the necessary support for Ukraine, that they can defend themselves, because they are also actually defending us, but also to ramp up our own defense capacities and defense industry. And talking about defense spending, you mentioned those 5%. So for countries which are bordering Russia or Ukraine, like Baltic states, like Poland, they are already raising defense spending to about 3% of GDP and aiming for 4%. So it just has become a necessity. So we were reaping this peace benefit maybe since the end of the Cold War, when the world could afford spend less on defense and spend more on something else. But now, with Russia behaving like an aggressor, that has changed, and so we have to change as well.
I have to point that America may also behave like an aggressor with Denmark. It's a possibility you have to keep in mind.
Just maybe to finish on this cooperation on US. So our approach on cooperation with US is that EU and US are strategic allies. We are like-minded partners, and especially in situation where autocracies are challenging the current rules-based international world order, it's important that democracies are working together, and it is with this spirit of cooperation that we are approaching also the new Trump administration.
But with, you know, there is a very clear change in outlook between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. I understand you're being very diplomatic, sir, which you must do. But there could be similar changes in Europe as well, with elections in Germany and France coming up. There is a rightward shift globally. How does that impact, and especially with your job of, you know, being trade commissioner, we're in a world now now where countries are turning inward. They're more protectionist, they focus more on their own domestic industrial policy, they want less globalization, and all of this, to bring it back to Russia, helps Russia, because in a world in which Russia is forming its own blocs, we haven't talked yet about its burgeoning alliance with North Korea, China, and Iran. How is Europe thinking about that?
That's exactly what I was mentioning, that it's not Russia alone. Indeed, it's finding allies, including North Korea, and it's worth noting that there are North Korean troops, significant numbers of them already engaged in this war against Ukraine. It's already happening. It's forging closer ties with Iran, which is supplying with different weapon systems, including Shahed drones. It's clear that we must look also beyond Russia in this response, and if there is some kind of axis of autocracies forming, it's important that we are also having our alliance of democracies to counter that. And there's this cooperation with US, but also with other like-minded partners in G7 and beyond the G7 is going to be very critical, and that's how EU is going to approach it.
Just give me a yes or no answer, but you still see the United States as like-minded, given that, you know, President Trump denied that he lost the last election, given that he just pardoned all of the people who were involved in the January 6th insurrection. You still see the United States as like-minded?
We have United States as a strategic partner and ally for many decades, and we see United States as indeed like-minded. Of course, we see that we are going to have challenges with Trump administration, what is now being talked about tariffs. There are other areas where it's going to be difficult, but we are ready to engage very closely with the new administration. Also, there is uncertainty surrounding what exactly stance and Trump administration will take vis-à-vis Russia and in terms of supporting Ukraine. But we are ready to engage in those discussions and find, to the extent possible, common solutions.
Minister, you mentioned that there could be a settlement one day, and we have to think about that day and the day after. What is your sense of, if there is some sort of a settlement, what kind of relations are you going to have with Russia after that?
I guess it's a bit too early to say, but we will definitely have a strong relation with Ukraine, stronger than before, and help them rebuild the country, using the frozen assets and more than we have done probably, and help them. But I mean, Russia has chosen its way. We have seen this coming, not exactly this war coming, but the path that Putin and the Russians have pointed out. And I guess we were probably naive 10, 15 years ago, and we shouldn't be naive in the future. It can take long before we have good relations with Russia, and it's not in our hands. It's really in Putin's and the coming government's hands. So I think we're problematic, and it's sad because we want things to be better, not worse. And right now it's a bit hopeless in some areas and hopeful in others, because when we in EU, we are 27 members, countries, when we talk now about Trump and tariffs, or we talk about the war, and Russia's war in Ukraine, tariffs is no problem at all compared to that we have war in Europe. And also, tariffs and US policy is, let me say this, we have our own destiny in our own hands in Europe. So we have to do more, both with economic growth and cooperation, and show that it's good. A market-based economy is good. And we'll continue to help Ukraine to make them stronger. And we'll see how the relation with Russia will be. But I think it will take a long, long, long time before we have good relations.
We're almost out of time. I just want to check if there are any questions in the room. Okay, in which case I'm going to ask one last question to you, Commissioner. President Zelensky of Ukraine has been here this week, and first in his speech, it struck me that he was talking a lot more about Europe than he has in the past, and separately when he was speaking with a few of us reporters on the sidelines on the record, it seemed to me that he was quite upset with Europe, A, because a lot of promises have been made about joining NATO, still hasn't happened, B, the security guarantees that they need for the future seems so much up in the air and so dependent on the United States. So there's a little bit of anger at Europe that I'm detecting, and to bring this all back to Russia, the reason why this matters is the longer this war goes on, the more of a problem it is for Europe and for Ukraine, of course. And the question I think Ukraine keeps asking is, why do you always give us enough to survive but not enough to win? What is Europe's answer?
That's a very valid question, and if we talk specifically on weapons delivery, we certainly should be giving more to Ukraine. We have now enough to cover Ukraine's financing need for this year, thanks to our Ukraine facility, thanks to the G7 extraordinary revenue acceleration loans, but we need to do more in terms of military supplies. That's critical right now.
Sobre el apoyo de la OTAN, la cantidad de presupuesto. Seguimos escuchando a Dombrovskis.
And last thing, which does not encourage Russia to continue its aggressive wars, because that's what Russia is clearly talking about. And yes, we need a very clear security guarantees for Ukraine, and the best security guarantee in this case is a NATO membership. Okay, that's not European Commission's business, obviously, but personally, that's what I would support, because we no, Ukraine has security guarantees. When it gave up its nuclear weapons in the early 90s, there were Budapest Memorandum and security guarantees, including from the United States, from Russia itself, or many countries. But we see that these kind of security guarantees have not really amounted to as much as they should have been. We are still discussing that there are not sufficient support for Ukraine to fight against Russian aggression. So therefore, the question is what other type of security guarantees we can have, and it was a mistake back in 2008 that Ukraine was not admitted to NATO, because Russia as aggressor is not provoked by strengths. It actually is the only thing it understands its strengths. Russia as aggressor is provoked by weakness. So, and that was what provoked that Russia saw, Putin saw Ukraine as a weak target. And okay, it's a three-day war, it's lasting already almost 3 years, and this target has not turned out to be so weak after all, and we have provided lots of support, but that's the only language which Russia understands, so we need to demonstrate strengths, and we need to integrate Ukraine in Western structures. We have already started accession negotiations for European Union with Ukraine, but in terms of security, of course, NATO is key.
I mean, of course, Zelensky is stressed and he can be angry on us. I mean, it's a war. Let me just remind you.
9:34 de la mañana, como ven, alterada la programación por la fotografía alrededor de Davos, que marca parte del camino. El Parlamento Europeo también está hablando calla calas alrededor de la respuesta europea. Lo comentaremos enseguida, comentaremos después de las primeras entrevistas esa fotografía que nos llega también del Parlamento Europeo con la nueva Borrell, con la nueva Comisaria Europea de Exteriores, Kaja Kallas, que está apuntando también a esa fotografía exterior.